He's one of my top waiver wire additions, highest priority additions heading into week 6. We're already 5 whole weeks into the 2025 NFL season, which means you already have some idea of how the players on your fantasy roster are going to perform for the rest of the season. Based on these assumptions, you already know which players you need to target, or at least which positions you should target on waivers. If you have that huge hole in your starting lineup, you should be trying each and every week to fill it, because if you want to contend for a championship, you need to have a team that's firing on all cylinders every single week. And there are a couple players on this list of guys you should be looking at on the waiver wire ahead of week 6 that I think could be long-term additions and be in your lineup for the rest of the season. These 4 waiver targets, especially the last 2, are guys that I think could have lasting impacts on the fantasy season as a whole. And if you're struggling at a certain position, you're going to want to stick around to the end to find out who they are. Let's go over these 4 targets and why they could help you win next week in fantasy football. The value of the first 2 players are kind of grounded in short-term value, and we're going to go ahead and start off with Michael Carter, veteran running back for the Arizona Cardinals. It's been a rough situation in Arizona's backfield over the past couple weeks. They lost James Conner in week 3 to a season-ending ankle injury, and now Trey Benson ahead of week 5 landed on IR with a knee injury. He'll be out for a minimum of 4 games, and before the Arizona Cardinals week 4 game against the Tennessee Titans, we didn't really know how this backfield was going to shake out in terms of volume. Well, now we have our answer. Michael Carter got a vast majority of these touches out of the backfield, 23 total touches, 18 carries, 5 targets. It's looking like he's going to fill this workhorse role unless anything changes, which it definitely could, but for the time being, I think Carter has some extreme short-term value. He is currently only rostered in 41.8% of ESPN fantasy football leagues, so he should be available in most places. If the name Michael Carter does sound familiar, he was a star at North Carolina along with Javonte Williams back in 2021, and he was selected in the 4th round of the 2021 NFL Draft. He was on the Jets for a few years, but now finds himself on the Arizona Cardinals. He's been there for a couple seasons already, and it seems like he's going to be the main running back stemming up in place of Conner and Benson. If he can get around 20 touches a game, he already got 23 in his first game as a starter. That's elite level volume. There are some holes you can poke in this argument. Carter wasn't very efficient in his first game starting, only 2.8 yards per carry off of those 18 rushing attempts. However, the 5 targets does intrigue me. If he can be a PPR option, that's going to give him a really nice floor in fantasy leagues. And speaking of a nice floor, that's what the volume as a whole can give him. No matter what the matchup is, if a guy's getting 20 touches, there's some kind of floor to how many points he's going to score each and every week. Now, this isn't me telling you that Michael Carter's an easy plug-and-play every week starter, but he does have a lot of upside if you can put him on the end of your bench. If you do end up needing him, he's worth a start until Trey Benson returns. He's one of the highest priority waiver additions this week, heading into week 6. If you need a running back, if you have a hole at the position in your fantasy lineup, Carter can be the guy that steps in for a couple weeks and provides some solid play. Now, this is dependent, obviously, on him getting a good amount of volume, probably similar to what he saw last week, hopefully in the coming weeks. But I think there's a solid chance that Carter ends up being a pretty solid player for the next couple games. Next up, we have Kendrick Bourne, veteran wide receiver for the San Francisco 49ers. He's back for a second stint in San Francisco after spending the last couple seasons in New England. And in week 5, he put up 10 receptions from 11 targets for a whopping 142 receiving yards. Now, he did benefit from the absences of Juwan Jennings and Ricky Pearsall, who are both out with injury in that game against the Rams on Thursday night. But if one of those receivers were to miss another game, I think Bourne is a solid option off the bench. And even if they don't, his production last week really intrigues me for the rest of the season, and only being owned in 6.5% of ESPN fantasy leagues, that presents basically no risk. He's going to be available everywhere. You can add him onto the end of your bench. If he performs, great. If he doesn't, you can drop him next week. No harm, no foul. Regardless, it's obvious that Bourne does have chemistry with current starting quarterback for the 49ers, Mac Jones. Obviously, Brock Purdy has struggled with injuries this season. He was out for the team's game against the Rams because he re-aggravated that toe injury, and Mac Jones had a ridiculously good game against that Rams defense in place of Purdy. And if you don't remember, Kendrick Bourne and Mac Jones were together in New England. Mac Jones was a first-round pick just a couple years ago for the Patriots, and Bourne was one of the main receivers when Jones was there. It's obvious that the two have carried over at least some of their offensive chemistry from their time together in New England, and they're looking great as a duo in San Francisco. It's also worth noting that on Thursday night, Kendrick Bourne was tied for the team's lead in targets with Jake Tonjes registering 11. Now, again, I said the first two players on the list are going to have short-term value. But like I said before, Bourne's role is going to decrease once Pearsall and Jennings return. But say Mac Jones makes another start, and say one of those receivers is out next week, Bourne's going to have a lot of value. This 49ers offense has surprised a lot of people, including me, after suffering a lot of injuries early in the season. Maybe Kendrick Bourne can have multiple weeks of value after putting up 142 yards against that Rams defense. You don't just put up 142 yards out of nowhere. I think that Bourne's going to have at least a role for the rest of the season on offense. San Francisco is one of the most intriguing teams in all of football. They currently sit at 4-1, and it seems like Bourne has been a big part of their game plan to get to that record. It'll be interesting to see if he can put up another good week of fantasy production, but I am interested in Bourne. If you need a spot start for week 6, pay attention to the rest of the 49ers injury updates. Bourne could be a major player depending on who's in and who's out of the lineup in week 6. Next up, we're moving into two players I think could be very long-term additions to your fantasy roster, guys that I think are higher priority adds. We're going to start off with a guy who's more rostered, and that's Darren Waller of the Miami Dolphins, a veteran tight end only rostered in 48.2% of ESPN fantasy leagues. He came out of retirement for the 2025 season and was traded to the Miami Dolphins. He was hurt for the first couple games, but made a big splash last week with 2 receiving touchdowns in week 4 against the New York Jets. But he didn't stop there. In week 5 against the Panthers, he had 78 receiving yards and a touchdown as well. He's emerged as a massive red zone target for this Dolphins team, just like he was in Las Vegas. And let's not forget what happened last season in Miami when Jonnu Smith entered this offense and broke out as a top 5 tight end in fantasy. Now, Jonnu Smith and Darren Waller are a little bit different in the way they play, but the point is I think head coach Mike McDaniel is willing to get a tight end active in this offense. And that knowledge of Jonnu Smith's breakout in 2024 makes me so interested in Darren Waller this season, especially with Tyreek Hill's unfortunate injury tearing multiple ligaments in week 4 and out for the entire season. There are several vacated targets in this offense waiting to be claimed. Darren Waller has been doing that the last couple weeks, especially in the red zone, and it's obvious he's headed for and really already has an elevated role just a couple weeks into the season on his new team in Miami. This dude could be a touchdown warrior and really has some upside in getting a bunch of receiving yards as well. He did that in week 5. Although a lot of his production came in the first half, I think Miami is going to want to get him more consistently involved in both halves if they can over the next couple weeks. It's obvious he's one of the best targets on this team, and if you have a hold the tight end position, the good news is I think Waller has the upside to maybe even finish in the top 10 if he keeps this up. Who knows, maybe he's one of the big breakout players off the waiver wire this season. Well, not really a breakout. We knew he was really good before, but his role on the Dolphins offense is really in question, especially after missing the first couple weeks and struggling with injuries in the past. If he can stay healthy, Darren Waller is a really strong tight end option. We've seen him dominate in fantasy before, especially when he was on the Raiders. I'm very excited to see what he does the next couple weeks. The Dolphins have a pretty bad defense, but you can see them in a lot of negative game scripts, meaning they're going to have to pass the ball a lot more. That's going to be great for a lot of the weapons in this offense: Devon Achane, Jalen Waddle, and Darren Waller. I'm telling you guys, may have a top 10 tight end, maybe even top 5 tight end in fantasy. Waller has that history of production. Who's to say he can't do it again after back-to-back strong weeks in terms of fantasy production? Overall, Darren Waller is one of the most high-profile waiver targets ahead of week 6. I think you should add him because, again, achieving long-term value from a waiver wire addition is an easy way to get yourself right into the fantasy football playoffs and even contend for a championship. Let's move on to the last player of this list, and that's Mason Taylor, rookie tight end for the New York Jets, another one of these long-term additions. If you followed this channel for a while, or even a subscriber to our Dynasty Trading Room channel, you know that I have been a big fan of Mason Taylor for a while. He's one of my favorite tight end prospects in a really strong tight end class coming into this year's draft. And over the past couple weeks, he has really made his mark on this New York Jets offense. Even though the Jets are 0-5, he's been one of the few bright spots on this team. And over the past couple weeks, there's been some really intriguing developments statistically with Taylor. In his last 3 games, he's garnered 25 targets. In his last 2 games, he's registered 132 receiving yards. As we've seen in the past, quarterback Justin Fields of the Jets tends to favor tight ends in the passing game. Cole Kmet in Chicago had a couple really nice years in fantasy football when Fields was the starting quarterback in the Windy City. Can Taylor be that guy for the Jets? I think he can be. He has the talent to do so, and it looks like it's already happening. He received 12 targets in week 5, and he took 9 of those for 67 receiving yards. A really strong stat line, and remember, he's just a rookie. Your league mates won't know who he is. You need to pick him up before they do. He's only currently owned in 8.1% of ESPN fantasy football leagues. That's a very small amount. I think if you get him now, you'll have him before his value skyrockets in the coming weeks. If he can become a consistent part of the Jets passing attack, that would make him a top 15 option. I think just like Darren Waller, he has that ceiling, that potential, because I think he was such a good prospect coming out of LSU. To be fair, the Jets have benefited offensively from a couple weaker opponents on defense. The Miami Dolphins and the Dallas Cowboys are the strongest defenses, and they've gone against them over the past couple weeks. And the Jets really did struggle in the passing game against the Buffalo Bills. But if Taylor gets those targets, he can remain a strong option. The tight end position is super volatile in fantasy football. If they're getting the targets, they should be the starter. He's a super good under the radar pickup, I think, this week. Again, you need to grab him now. And with Waller, he's one of my top waiver wire additions, highest priority additions heading into week 6. Hope you guys enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and tell me what you think in the comments. Did I miss anybody in this waiver wire video? Don't forget to subscribe for fantasy advice like this all season long. I'm Joe, and this is Fantasy Trading Room.